Hi, everyone. I'm Lance Robbins, and I'm here to talk with you about money and some strategies for getting your business off the ground. Welcome to this session, and thank you for joining. As a little bit of background about me, I live in northern Idaho near Sandpoint with my wife and three children. Love to be outdoors and love to be on the trails, whether that's a trail run, a mountain bike ride, or skiing. Big outdoors person. I work in a couple of different areas. One is as a fractional human resource leader. So I help people with the people part of their business. And as such, I'm also an entrepreneur as a professional service provider there. I do keynotes and workshops as part of my services as well. And one of my favorite things is learning together, interacting, having a good time chatting, hearing your experiences. So glad I get to share some of mine with you today and look forward to having the chance to hear some of yours at some point in the future. We'll go ahead and get into our topic today. Money is such a critical and important part of business. Money is something that's hard to discuss, puts a lot of strain on relationships. It's always that part you might feel like tiptoeing around when you're trying to close a customer project. Sales is hard, especially when you don't have a sales background, but you're a new business owner, so you are your own head of sales. So I have a lot of empathy and sympathy for those of you who find yourself in that situation. And I just want to talk a little bit more about how money can impact our businesses. So to begin with, I don't want you to be a statistic. 50% of the new businesses that start are going to fail in the first 5 years. And of those that survive the first 5 years, it's also said that usually 50% of those are not going to survive the next five. And the number one reason is people run out of money. Said another way, you run out of time because money buys you that time. But we don't want to be a statistic in that category. Would much rather see you as a statistic in the next couple of categories that we can talk about. Specifically here in Idaho, there's about 140,000 people who are self-employed. The term is often gig workers, contributing to the local economy. I am a fractional service provider, so I find myself in that category. But I'm a self-employed solopreneur. And that self-employed segment is growing faster than traditional employment in a lot of sectors, like professional services. Transportation, arts is another one that is seeing a huge influx of self-employed. Gig workers and professional services grew by 40%, and transportation more than doubled over the last 10 years or so. So we're seeing a lot of growth. People saying, hey, I see the traditional path for employment, and I know what that looks like. I've experienced that. I'd like to take a different path. I'm going to be a self-employed business owner. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to take the risks that come with that, and I'm also going to reap the benefits that come with that as well. And so people are leaving traditional employment at a higher rate than ever before for a self-employed route. And if you are someone in that self-employed route and you're new to this, you have a product idea, you're trying to figure out, hey, how am I going to launch this correctly and be successful, or you're converting the skills and experience that you have into a professional service business, that's great. You are part of that big crowd. If you've already established your business and you're thinking, I want to grow my business now, I want to see how I take my business to the next level, you can be a statistic in this group. You can be a small business owner that begins to employ others and sees your business grow that way. More than half of the private workforce in Idaho is small businesses, 55%. That outpaces the national average significantly. And over the last 10 years, small businesses created almost 80% of all net jobs in the state of Idaho. So this is a huge part. Self-employment, small business, critical to the economic health here in Idaho. So you're part of that. You're part of that. I'm part of that. And we're in this together. One of the ways that we can get started as an entrepreneur is through what we call a side hustle. This is kind of that flight simulator experience if you're an entrepreneur, if you will. And one of the ways that I like to talk about how a side hustle helps us get started is for one, it provides a lot of that stability. I'm not leaving my job right away and putting all the risk on being successful, on right away at the beginning. I have some stability on the side, and I can put my foot into the entrepreneurship waters and test that out before I jump in. Like I said earlier, I'm a big outdoor sports, trail sports person. And so this is me on a new trail that was recently built in my backyard. But before you do something like this, in the mountain biking community, we have a saying: pre-ride, re-ride, then free ride. I would not approach this this feature without having a pre-ride to check it out. How high is it? What's the landing look like? What's the angle look like? I need to reduce my risk of a crash, because this can be a rough way to end your day or maybe your season if you're not successful on a jump like this. So we're going to look at it. We're going to analyze the situation. I'm doing that by not riding it. And then a re-ride, right? If I can ride over the feature slow and in control. If it's a feature that doesn't allow for that, I can ride around it as close as possible to get a second look. I'm going to reduce the risk of failure every time I take a incrementally, I get incremental exposure to the feature. And once we're done, once we've got it figured out, then hey, we can have at it. We can have a free ride. We can do this drop. And our risk is as low as it can get before we take the jump. And with entrepreneurship, risk is never zero, but we want to see how we can reduce that risk. So pre-ride, re-ride, free ride. Start with your side hustle. What can I do on the side without committing to leave the ground, so to speak here? One principle that I want to introduce and share with you is the idea of sell it before you make it. And that's what we've been talking about. Sell it before you make it. So if you have a product that you're trying to build, that you want to launch, one way that you can sell it before you make it is find out, hey, would anybody want to buy this if I made it? A classic way that this is done for product owners, and I'm not saying, hey, you need to take your product idea right to Kickstarter, but how can you use a platform like Kickstarter or something similar, or just get potential user feedback on if this was a product out there, would it be valuable to you? So this founder here in the example, Limo 1, this robot mower, they thought, hey, if we can get $30,000 of investment, then we can build out phase one of whatever it is to launch our business. And as you can see here to the bottom right, this is an all or nothing type project. So these guys took this idea of sell it before you make it and thought, okay, if we can sell $30,000 of this idea, then we can start on phase one of this project, rather than build phase one of the project and hope that we can raise the $30,000 that we spent to get there. Because we don't want to be upside down. We don't want to take that risk if we don't have to. So rather than raising $30,000, they exceeded their goal by about $1.6 million. And they're going to be able to build out phase one plus of this robot mower product, which is really cool. As I was doing research and preparing this, I had to watch the video. I had to check it out. And I was thinking, hey, I think I want one of these things. They're pretty awesome. But yeah, they've got a great idea. And now they have financial backing to go ahead and build out the product and deliver to folks who have already paid for it. So in the same way that you, as an entrepreneur, you want to reduce your risk with a pre-ride and a re-ride before you take all that risk to build your inventory and to stock your warehouse or your garage, whatever it looks like with your product. find ways that you can sell your product before you do that. If you're a service provider, right, how can you then also think about selling your service? What are the things that you need to build in? What are the templates? What are the forms? What is the IP that you'll need to organize and illustrate? And what assets do you need to create before you can really deliver your services? It's easy to spend a lot of time doing that and then take that to market and find that somebody wants to buy something that's a little bit different, but you spent all your time building version A when really what someone wants is version B. So test the market. See what someone will buy before you actually make it. And in so doing, save yourself a lot of time, a lot of inventory cost, and begin to fund your business before you've had to invest your own resources. So what are the benefits? These are some questions that you can write down, you can think about for yourself. What are the benefits of sell it before you make it for your business? I don't know what your business is. I don't know what it looks like if you're in a product or you're in service and what life stage of business you're in. But for your business, what are the benefits that you could realize if you embraced more of a sell it before you make it mindset, especially if you're early on? What kind of difference would that make? And then how would you apply that principle in your business? What would you do on a tactical level? What could you change? What approach could you take that would let you actually practice this sell it before you make it principle? I'll give you another example from my own experience. I like I said at the beginning, I do keynotes and I do workshops, and I actually built a training for remote management, skills for remote leaders in a new digital workplace where people are working hybrid or remote. They have employees who are not in the same office as them, not in the same city or time zone as them. And this is a skill set that needs to be developed. And so I built a 6-part course on this. I built all the content. But before recording 6 professionally produced presentations that could be purchased for on-demand consumption by a consumer, by a buyer, customer, I wanted to sell that first. So I went about the work of selling to a cohort who would buy in and expect to have access to this content with a month or 2 of lead time. And once that sale is completed, then the video production began. And that's where the results are. So rather than putting out the time and effort to record and build that out before I had a buyer, I went to the buyer first. I pitched the idea. I had enough of a preview where folks could see what this would look like, have a taste for what the result would be. But before putting in the time and effort and personal resources to develop the product, the buyer had to be in place. So that's a sell it before you make it principle. The next thing to keep in mind is about building your runway. How much runway do you need to get your business off the ground? You've got some ideas about how to reduce your risk, reduce your exposure. But like we said, there's always going to be risk when you're starting your own business. So how do you minimize the chance of failure, maximize your chance of success with the amount of time that you have to get your business off the ground? Charles Lindbergh, famous aviator, to make the first transatlantic flight across from New York to France in his famous airplane, the Spirit of St. Louis. The morning of his flight, he had never attempted a takeoff on that particular runway with the weight and the amount of equipment that was on the plane. The weather had been wet. The runway was muddy. The mudway was runny. The runway was muddy. And at the end of the runway were trees and power lines. So carrying extra fuel and everything he needed, his plane was heavier, and it wasn't known for sure if he'd get off the ground and clear the runway, clear the power lines at the end of the runway. But he decided that it was a risk he was willing to take. And so as he increased the throttle and he began his famous journey across the Atlantic, the runway was barely long enough. He got off the ground, bounced that airplane a few times before it finally took flight, and as they say, it cleared the power lines by about 20 feet. Very, very close. Too close for comfort for me. I'm not into aviation. I'm not a pilot, but that feels like it would be too close for comfort. But to be fair, it was a success, right? The runway was calculated perfectly. It was exactly what he needed, not a foot too long and not a foot too short. It was just right. And he cleared it, and he completed the historic transatlantic flight. But as we think about running out of time because, hey, we ran out of money, how can we begin to mitigate the risks there? So there's a formula we can follow. It's pretty simple. It goes like this. Cash divided by burn rate equals your runway. So if you're following the principles before, right, maybe you're starting this as a side hustle, you're selling things before you take on the risk and the burn of building your inventory or making your products and actually delivering those services, you can control the rate of burn. Because if you're taking more money in, even though you're investing some into your business, that burn is reduced by the amount that you take in. But cash on hand, so let's say we have $10,000 on hand and our burn is $5,000 per month. We know how much runway do we have. 10,000 divided by 5,000 is you have 2 months of runway. So ask yourself the question, can I get my business off the ground in 2 months? Because at the rate I'm burning, I will run out of cash, which means I'll run out of time in 2 months. If the answer is no, we have to do one of two things. We have to increase our cash or decrease our burn. That means maybe we save more before we start our business. Or maybe that means we slow down how quick we think we're going to grow. We hang on to the full-time job, or we take the consulting agreement that isn't what we really want to be doing, but we're willing to do that to buy ourselves some more runway. In general, 18 to 24 months is what people say for a new business to be successful, is how much time it will take to get off the tarmac, so to speak. So think about that. Do this calculation for yourself. How much time do I think I need to get my business in the air? How much cash on hand do I have? And what's my burn rate? How much cash do I need to survive? Right? What's the net number between what I'm bringing in and what I'm burning? How quickly is my runway getting shorter and shorter? Now, if we've done the pre-ride, we've done our re-ride, we have the runway ahead of us. We're ready to leave our employment, looking for the reward of those open skies, taking off the parachute, right? Going in. One approach that's been something that's been quite successful, it's worked well for me, and it's worked well for a number of people that I've spoken to. Over the last 18 months, I have hosted a podcast called Fractional. You can find that at fractional.fm in your browser or anywhere podcasts are streamed. But a number of our guests that we spoke to talked about when they took the plunge as a service-based entrepreneur to go from a full-time job to being a professional fractional service provider. The first thing they did was they approached their employer and converted them to their very first customer. And that's something that I just wanted to share with this group here. You can listen to Caitlin Little's story. The link is here in the document that will be shared on how she converted her employer to her first customer. And that gave a lot of anchor revenue. It wasn't full-time. This was a part of her new business portfolio. But it gave a sense of early cash flow that was really, really helpful for her business. And I've done the same, like approaching a former employer and saying, here's what I've been doing for you. I'd like to propose that I do X, Y, and Z for you in the future. Here's how it changes the cost, and here's how it maybe changes the structure of the team. Here's why it's strategically a good idea to think about working with me as a consultant or a vendor, an external partner, rather than as an employee going forward, right? Because you're ready to leave. But if you can leave and take something with you, that's even better. So think about what are the strategies you have for converting your existing employer to a customer? Are you taking some of the skills and experience that you've been giving to them and turning that into your business? If so, how can you continue a relationship there? And with the success that you have with them, how can you turn your employer, your first customers, into a referral machine? And that's a topic for a whole nother discussion about lead generation and sales process and sales strategy. But when you're first getting off the ground, taking something with you from your existing employer is such a huge benefit. So kind of going back over this here, in summary, a few things to keep in mind. One, if you are getting started as an entrepreneur, cash is the number one thing that you likely will be worried about, and you're not alone in that. Cash is a big topic, and it can be very stressful. So be kind to yourself and give yourself some grace here as you think about how you're going to tackle the concept of cash flow and come to terms with that. You're one of a big growing population, not just in the state of Idaho, but nationwide, globally, people that are embracing entrepreneurship and wanting to have a little more control over the factors, that the revenue that can be generated, who you work for, the type of work you work on. There are tremendous rewards to be had. Find ways that you can minimize your risk rather than jumping in with both feet at the beginning. How can you pre-ride or analyze the situation and put your foot in there without making a huge commitment to leave the ground and take that risk? It could be a side hustle. It could be a Kickstarter, an Indiegogo pre-sale of a product or idea. This could be something where you talk with friends and family and get pre-orders. Anything that you can do that will generate revenue before you have to put out the resources for it is going to be a big win early in your business. There will come a time when it's financially beneficial to not have to do that any longer, but at the early stages of your business, if you can sell it before you have to make it, that's a big win for you. Consider that side hustle. Consider that sell it before you make it. Think about your runway. Do the math. Count the cost. And I forget who says this, so I'm not even going to try to attribute it to somebody, but there are no failed businesses, just ones that ran out of time. And it's discouraging, right? When you've left something behind, you've made this commitment, you've made a change, your family's behind you, you're all making sacrifices, and to get so close but not quite make it off the ground at the end of the runway because your runway just ended up being too short is devastating. So be patient. Think about how much cash I need to have on hand to be successful. Think about your burn rate. What are the factors you can control? What are the things that you're spending on that maybe you don't have to for a season while you get your business off the ground? What are the ways that you can slow down your burn rate so you can extend your runway and get those wheels off the ground? And then as you start to find some success and you're ready to make that full-time change, what can you take with you from your existing employer and the network that you've built in the career that you've been in to this point that will give you that extra bit of lift as you start your journey? I hope this has been helpful. Would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your feedback. And if you'd like to find me and to connect with me, my email here is lance@lancehrobbins.com. My website is lancehrobbins.com. And I'm most active on LinkedIn. You can find me there and would be happy to connect and chat with you. And I look forward to talking to you again in the future.